Welcome back to another edition of the PigX podcast. I'm your host, Delaney Howell. Technology is always a hot topic in agriculture, especially when discussing how different systems can work together to maximize efficiency. That was the focus of a few sessions at this year's Iowa Swine Day, highlighting smarter livestock solutions and specific technologies in the swine barn. At the intersection of technology and health, two voices from Brenneman Pork. Aaron Brenneman, a Day One care specialist and public relations coordinator for the company, and Jeremy Robertson, head of operations, share how they're pushing software beyond its original purpose. Together, they explore the potential of overlapping data points to more accurately measure pig production, discuss how technology is enabling more individualized pig care, and ultimately providing producers with better insights into their swine herd health. Then later on in the episode, I sit down with Dr. Suzanne Leonard, assistant professor at North Carolina State University. She cautions farmers not to make adopting technology more complicated than necessary, highlighting some tools she's excited about and explaining ways farmers can measure the true value from these systems. It's an action-packed episode, so let's dive in with Aaron and Jeremy from Brenneman Pork.
I am Aaron Brenneman. I'm a Day One care specialist and public relations for Brenneman Pork. My story begins off the farm. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and never really gave a second thought to where my food came from. I thought food came from the grocery store. I did work with horses in the city with a horseback riding lesson program, and that's what really got me interested in going to Iowa State University, originally to be a veterinarian, of course. I started my career at Iowa State as a pre-vet major. I am obviously not a veterinarian, but I graduated with an animal science degree. But more importantly, I met my husband, Tim, there, and we got married and moved back to his family's pig farm in southeast Iowa. And that's where I kind of began this journey, trying everything on the farm, and really loved the farrowing house and Day One care. And I really settled in there and started to specialize and hone in my skills on Day One care. And from there, I started doing speaking events and speaking about sharing the passion for agriculture because I didn't know anything about it growing up. And now just discovering it, I became very passionate about telling that story on behalf of farmers to consumers like me when I was growing up, and sharing all those wonderful things. So I kind of rolled that into what I do as well. So I give farm tours and share social media stuff and do that. And when I'm not speaking about agriculture, I'm in the barns with the Day One pigs.
Now, Jeremy, how about you? Share with us some of your background.
Jeremy Robertson. I'm head of production at Brenneman Pork. I actually grew up in southern Indiana. As I was discovering as a young adult what I was going to do in my life, I had the opportunity to work for a local family farming operation that over time built a passion, later leading me into feed and research within the state of Indiana, later relocated me to the state of Iowa, where I, in time, was introduced and met Rob Brenneman. As Rob expanded his operations and built new sow farms, I was pulled in to help on a contract basis to grow the operation and adapt part of the system the way he wanted to manage it. And he wore me down over time, and we just decided it was a good fit. Even though I wasn't adopted, became part of the family. So since then, myself, along with my wife and 3 children, live locally in Washington County and have a passion for agriculture.
And I am a native Iowan coming from your neck of the woods in southeast Iowa. But for those of our listeners unfamiliar with the company, share a little bit more about the background of Brenneman Pork.
Absolutely, and I'll try to do it justice, not being a family member. If you don't know Rob, I've never met someone so passionate about pig production, the industry. From an early age into marriage to Shar, had a passion for agriculture, especially had a passion for pigs. He's lived through turmoil in terms of prosperity and lack thereof due to where the farm industry's been in the 80s and 90s. He's taken his passion, his ingenuity, and his ability to drive forward and expand his operation. Have 4 great kids. Oldest son, Tim. Tim's part of the operation every day, from crops all the way to pigs. Next, oldest daughter Jenna was a local school nurse in the nursing system, and helps out today on the day-to-day from the HR, if you will. Today, Jenna would help out on wellness and workman comp and other surrounding HR issues. Jenna's husband's also involved. He served our country, came home, and today he and his team are in charge of hauling all the manure within our owned operation. Next in line, you have Amy. Amy does a lot of things for us as a system. Internally, she reports a lot of our production numbers for us abroad. And then Kyle, her husband, is in charge of all company maintenance and repairs. Last but not least, the baby, we have Carrie and husband Nate. And I have to stop right there because basically the entire family, including Tim and Aaron, all live within feet of the same square section, so mile. But Nate, has his own ground management business that Carrie also helps out with. Not to mention that Carrie and Amy both have young children right now, so happy for them. And also that all 4 of the kids are invested in the business along with their spouses, from sow farms to owning nurseries and finishers and part of the day-to-day.
To add to what Jeremy said, Brenneman Pork is a 54,000 sow farrow to finish farm. One of the things that I would say is very unique about us is, as Jeremy mentioned, Rob, my father-in-law is a very passionate and driven person, and we are always encouraged to push the limits, constant change, and to do one thing better than everybody else. And that was something that's always driven me, and I was always grateful for. Was coming from the city, I could have just been brushed off as a crazy city girl and what do you know, but I was empowered to find my way and to create a niche for myself within this industry and to really take off with it. And I am always grateful for that. They gave me a lot of empowerment to really do what I do or what I love to do the best. And they gave me all the tools to do that, which, as young people just coming out of school, like I said, we could have just been brushed off. No, we've always done it this way, but that's not the culture that we create. We are always pushing for change and to do constant improvement. So that is one thing about our farm I do think is very unique, not without pain, but always worth it in the end.
Perfect. That's a great segue into how to harness technology for smarter livestock farming solutions. That's a very robust subject that you covered at the Iowa Swine Day. Jeremy, what does that topic really boil down to?
Air, water, feed. So our job every day is in the production of pigs. And like I alluded to earlier, when you walk into a sow farm and you see 35, 40 people, you're in the people business of teaching them how to raise pigs. And so as we adapt to changes in volatility in the market, changing industries in terms of labor, the stresses, different generations in the workforce, trying to find solutions to elevate our game to expose the very best genetically out of the animal and the most efficiencies out of our operation to be the most competitive at the end of the day.
And so feed was one of those that you mentioned, right? You said air, water, feed. Right?
Feed is the highest cost item that's used in a pig today. Absolutely.
So you talked a lot about the feed mill upgrades, some of the things that you've done within the Brenneman Pork space to help with really harnessing the power of that within the ecosystem that you're building. Talk to us a little bit about some of the lessons that you've learned from the feed side as it relates to some of the work that you've done.
Absolutely. And we can discuss it, but it came out of Rob's crazy brain. Just to clarify, he's good at throwing things at the wall or basically saying, I have an idea, now you guys go figure out how to make it work. So as we have adapted this technology, some of the pains like we talked about with the feed mill, you would never think when you're working with programmers that they believe they're networkers and networkers believe that they're programmers, but trying to work out information in terms of Wi-Fi networks, in terms of programming or code, if you will, for different actions out of a feed mill for dispersal or delivery is a big deal. So it teaches you how to recreate your relationships and how to manage, like I alluded to earlier, what are your true asks. And if you don't know, you have to be in business with a partner that's willing to sustain the process of understanding what that is.
So walk me through that maybe a little bit more. That's very high level, talking about coding and programming for people who that's maybe not their world. What does that mean?
Absolutely. So, and it's not mine either. So we that's not something I nerd out on. So I like to make pigs, but I've had to learn this through the process and it's been painful. Essentially, sometimes we're going to ask software to do things it's not built originally or meant to do. So if you have the vision, and that's why producers need to push this innovation, if they understand what needs to happen, then we need to get in the face or the hands of somebody that knows how to make it capable. So in terms of if we need to make in the milling operation something to run longer, shorter, if we need it to say something different, if we need it to open a different gate or a door, that usually involves writing of a code or software to control the system. As you start working with people in terms of networking that's supposed to get Wi-Fi there, they want to service your account. Everybody wants your business. So everybody thinks they're a one-stop shop until you get really customizable on your demands.
Yeah, and I found it interesting. You guys are using a lot of different technologies that are not super compatible, it sounds like, across the board. You have an iOS or an Apple-based platform. You have a couple Android-based platforms. How are you getting those all to talk to each other?
We're not. Yeah, I think a farmer by nature is going to cherry pick what they like out of certain things, right? So I think not very often are you going to find that something is a one-stop shop for every aspect of the farm. And I think I talked about in there that, we've never built something the same way twice. And even, the newest thing that we built, we're probably going to change something because of what we've learned from it before. And so, yes, integration in some of these different systems would ease some pains. But that being said, I think everybody has been amazing to work with and to understand that. I think it's a growing pain on both sides, from the product as well as the farm, right? And so the product has, they're touting X, Y, and Z as their selling points. And then when you put them into a farm where you have 1,500 of them, any little flaw is now going to be compounded and actually pretty exposed, which is going to help us all get better. We're going to learn how to overcome those things. Whereas if you had it in a system that maybe only had 30, it wouldn't be such a big deal. But now when you put it 15 times that or whatever that is, it becomes a big deal and you start to expose those little things. And I think we all grow together from the product side as well as the farming side of things.
And you mentioned some interesting examples of how maybe we're not quite there yet of how the different technology stacks are talking together. Because you mentioned some of the pieces you're using are like PigFlow, Justall. They're not quite talking together. They're using different platforms, but the maybe potential for them to talk together or improve where you're allocating your time and energy from a labor perspective, or just some of the capabilities that they're going to maybe be able to do from a data or maximizing efficiency perspective. Just maybe walk us through what are some of those, down in the future visionary pieces that you're looking forward to.
Right. So I see so much potential. And I think today, in the scheme of things of just getting everybody maybe integrated into these systems, it might seem minor, but down the road, we are collecting so much data for so many different things that it's so exciting to me to see that once you can start to overlap these different data points from feed to temperature to anything, right? Ventilation to, and then down to mortality, and you can really start pinpointing issues and in real time. Right. So now I can see that a change that I made here a couple hours later, even sometimes in some cases, did that make a difference versus waiting 3 weeks till the pigs are weaned and you get the report back. Right. And so it's very exciting to see that once we can start overlapping the data from all these different systems and the integration, not only from an efficiency standpoint, but being able to foresee issues and create ideal environments and situations to truly raise a healthy pig, which we all know creates a great system from birth to market.
So Delaney, it's been years, but they came out with precision farming. So now we run planters today that we can zone plant and get that seed and adjust that depth as we're planting 10 miles an hour. So what says that you can't have one source of technology spread across every member within a farm or a system? You can load a sow into a farrowing crate. She can be fed by her age, or parity. She can be fed by her genetics. She can be fed by the day, by her requirements, by how many pigs are nursing on her. That optimizes the greatest potential that we can to farm.
Yeah, I'm just curious. To your point, it seems like on the crop side, there has been a lot more advancement on that precision point where now you can spray down to the individual weed, the see and spray technology, but it doesn't really feel always that the livestock side maybe has been as advanced to get it down to the individual animal. And you talked about individuality of now we're starting to get to that point, but why don't you think there's been as much focus on the individual animal?
It takes, a crop planted in a field, easily accessible without as many rules as walking into a farm is a little different. We have the tendency to treat everything as a whole within a farm. So typically from the world of feeding, you're treating everybody as a whole because we didn't have the finite and cost behind it was exponentially large to understand exactly what those requirements are. So if we have the technology, now we can find the answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe just to end with that too, Aaron, just hitting again on that kind of individuality. What I kind of took away from you was even though we may be having larger facilities, barns, whatever, in reality, we're getting more granular and being able to serve the animal to a more individual scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to look at this very often from a big picture point of view and really a storytelling of agriculture point of view. And as we start to integrate more and more technology, I feel like when you don't understand that, it can seem very robotic, like we're taking the feeling away from the farm by integrating an automated feeding system or something. But when you look at it and we talk about it and explain it, we're really giving that individuality back to the animal. We're truly seeing her as an individual and we're catering to her. And when I say her, I'm speaking to, of course, of my moms, my sow mamas, but, and really starting to really see her not as just a part of the whole, but as an individual herself and feeding her according to that and, to her number of pigs and to her age and her body condition. And we can monitor all of that. And then obviously down to her history. I mean, we looked at the camera technology of, selecting for traits and mothering ability, we're really getting back down to that individual animal through the help of all this technology. So I would love to tell the story more in that light because it's an incredibly exciting time. I think agriculture is just fascinating. And, we talk about technology in all parts of the world. But for some reason, agriculture gets painted in the light of being very old school. And I think that our morals and our passions are based in our roots, but we're advancing just as well as everybody else in that world of modern technology.
Wow, so much technology being talked about across the industry, and we're thankful to have Aaron and Jeremy from Brenneman Pork joining us on this month's episode. Now let's transition to hearing what technology looks like within a research and academic setting with Dr. Suzanne Leonard, starting with her connection to agriculture and technology.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Suzanne Leonard. I am an agricultural engineer by training. I grew up with beef cattle and then showing and having one of just about every pet animal you can imagine. So really grew up with a passion for animals and production animals and livestock specifically. And then I got my bachelor's degree from North Carolina State in ag engineering and then PhD from Iowa State, also in ag engineering, focusing on animal production systems.
So that's a really unique kind of intersection of being within engineering and also animal agriculture at North Carolina State. Talk to me a little bit more about how technology really has played a unique intersection in some of the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, on our farms today, they are very complex systems. We have a lot of factors and a lot of different inputs and outputs coming on any given day. And so technologies offer a way to sort of centralize that management and often optimize some of that decision making. So if we can help monitor different things on the farm and we know where we're benchmarking now, then we can set goals on how to improve that moving forward and then identify where those areas of opportunity are, and specifically the ones that are going to give us the greatest margin of return.
And I really appreciated how you framed technology kind of being this pie in the sky idea, because so often when we hear the word technology, as you alluded to, everyone probably gets a very different visual in their mind of what that means to them. So how do you frame that conversation with folks working in the swine industry?
Yeah, so technology is definitely really broad, and some people do think it's the robot chicken farms where there aren't even a human involved, and then oftentimes the technology is just a different app on your phone, a simple improved calculator method or something. So there's a lot of different levels of investment and opportunity, and simple technologies can be just as beneficial as the really big mega umbrella ones too, depending on where your system is and often. So what I like to start with producers is, what are your goals? Why are you interested in this area? What is your biggest problem that you would like help with? And what's your least favorite job, or where do you think your greatest opportunity for improvement is? And then we can talk about, if this is your goal, what could be some objectives, and then find some specific technologies or opportunities to address those specific objectives.
And it's also important to recognize what technology can do for you and what really it can't do for your operation. So walk us through maybe a few of the points that you hit on here today.
Yeah, so technologies are definitely a great tool, but they aren't going to be your end all be all. You cannot out technology poor husbandry or bad management decisions. So the technologies can help you get down to, rather than managing based on your site status or even your barn, down to a pen or individual animal level. So getting you more precise targeted data and information, but it's not going to be able to solve all of your problems all at once. And a lot of these technologies are really easy to implement and use. They're quite simple to set up and get started with, but they're not going to be able to be fully accurate and fully autonomous and maintenance free forever. You are still going to have to go in and interact with them from time to time just to make sure that they're still doing their job.
So as you think about some of the work that you're doing at North Carolina State, how are you integrating what technology we're seeing come to fruition in the swine space within some of the research and maybe some of the facilities that you guys are updating right now?
Yeah, we're doing some commercial partnership studies looking at these different gas sensors and environmental sensors, and then tying that to finishing pig mortality. And so we found really good correlation there. And by understanding that relationship, we can then start making some targeted interventions and identifying where those cutoffs are now that we can monitor and sort of prove the financial value there to make the flip switch back and really identify and improve those conditions. And then we're also looking at behavior cameras for monitoring pen level pig behavior, looking at weight estimation cameras, as well as some of the pig counting cameras too. So a lot of different technologies out there, and we're doing some renovations at NC State to upgrade our facilities and have the opportunity to install some precision electronic sow feeder stations and some of the feed blending technologies as well.
How do you even get started making those decisions to evaluate what technology to implement at the producer level?
Yeah, the first thing is budget and value. So even if it has a really great value outcome on the technology, if you don't have that initial investment check money to make, then it's not going to work out. So you need to figure out where your price points are and what areas you want to solve first. And if you can implement one technology that has a lot of value, then that will give you a better margin, and then that gives you more money to continue that investment process. And maybe you don't need 25 cameras and all sorts of different technologies and widgets, but figure out the things that are most important to you and your production goals in order to figure out where to start investing.
Value, there's that word again too, that might mean one thing to you and another thing to me. Maybe articulate that a little bit more for us too, how you're evaluating value specifically.
Yeah, value is most often associated with the almighty dollar. If you can reduce your input costs or improve that animal productivity, decrease your feed conversion ratio, improve pounds or piglets per sow per year. Those are the obvious ways to provide value. But when we think about technologies, there's also value in improved animal welfare, earlier identification of disease, so you have reduced treatments on farm, and also looking at worker frustration or job satisfaction can be another really important values that technologies can add to your systems.
Okay, so we're thinking about testing it from a value-based perspective. Really, ultimately, is it improving my margin? Is it driving ROI? But then how long should I be testing a piece of equipment for before I'm making a judgment decision? Is this a multi-year process, or how am I going about making that decision?
Yeah, so ideally you would hopefully have some of that data and farm studies from other producers or other systems that have the technology before you make that leap. So if you can find a similar production size farm or similar challenged farm that is already working with that technology or company, that can be a good place to start. Ideally, you want to have a fairly quick ROI on a technology, depending on the cost range. Within 6 months to a year and a half, I would say you would want to see that return back, just so that way you can keep things rolling forward. And our industry is always changing, very dynamic, more technologies coming up all the time. So
would you say it's different for every operation, Suzanne?
definitely. Yeah, depending on what your specific goals and outcomes and stage of productivity, and if you're looking to continue farming for the next 50 years versus someone who's maybe going to retire in the next 10 years, you're going to need a little bit faster ROI in those situations.
Yeah, and maybe risk tolerance might be a factor at play too.
Definitely.
What are some of the technologies coming down the pipeline that you are most excited about?
Yeah, I think the classical swine technology example would be the electronic sow feeder, where you can weigh out the portions of feed as well as weigh the animal when they come in to set those growth curves. I think there's a lot happening right now on the camera computer vision front when we think about the counting, weight estimation, even some dabbling into body condition score, a little more pie in the sky looking at individual pig identification, whether that be reading an ear tag or not. I think there's also really great technologies looking at sounds in the barn to look at maintenance factors when it comes to fans and heaters, if that equipment starts to sound off, or if you hear bearings going out on a piece of equipment, for example, or looking at cough monitoring, sneeze monitoring in the animals themselves.
And artificial intelligence is also a big part of the conversation today. How do you think that's impacting decisions as it relates to technology, and where do you think that conversation continues to shape form here over the next couple of years?
I think that AI can definitely help accelerate our pace of discovery and decision making, but knowing that it's more of oftentimes a black box approach. You may not understand exactly how you get from question to answer, but in some cases, all you need is the answer, not so much how those intermediate pieces work. So I think it's a really great tool in our toolbox and can save us a lot of computational time and power in order to get to those decisions more quickly by using AI. And as an industry, we collect a lot of data, and we are definitely short on analysts and people who can sit down and really grind out that data to get to those decisions. So I think AI can be a great tool to help manage all of our information flows and get to decisions.
So as, folks listening to the podcast are just thinking through maybe some take-home messages, what are some practical considerations as it relates to technology?
You don't want to make it too complicated if you don't have to. If all you want to do is measure temperature, then don't go buy a thermal camera. Just buy a temperature sensor. There's a lot of more simple steps that you can do that will save you a lot of money and headache in the long run. And then also think about making sure the technology aligns with your goals and that you have a clear definition of what success with that piece of technology looks like for you. So that way you know what you're targeting and in the long run to make sure you're achieving what you wanted with that technology.
3 unique perspectives on technology and plenty of ways you can put this information into action. A big thank you to Aaron, Jeremy, and Dr. Leonard for sharing their time and expertise with all of us. You can find more details and their full presentations on the Iowa Pork Industry Center YouTube page. Aaron and Jeremy's session is titled Iowa Swine Day 2025, Harnessing Technology for Smarter Livestock Farming Solutions, and Dr. Leonard's presentation is titled Technologies in the Swine Barn. Today's episode was packed with highlights and insights, and we appreciate you sticking with us until the end. Be sure to join us again next month for another timely conversation on all things swine. Until then, I'm Delaney Howell, and this has been the PigX Podcast.
PigX is a national podcast hosted by the Pig Livability Project partners at Iowa State University, Kansas State University, and Purdue, and supported by the Iowa Pork Industry Center. For more information on the project, head to www.piglivability.org, or to inquire directly with questions regarding the project, email ipic.iastate.edu. PigX, Ideas in the swine industry worth sharing.